Most sobriety sound stations have a MIDI interface. Sometimes they're referred to as a MIDI control or a MIDI controller. It's the thing that looks like a small piano. The model that's in front of you is probably an Arturia MiniLab MK2. We're going to refer to it as the MiniLab in this video. The MiniLab allows you to play notes in a virtual instrument track without having to manually use your cursor to add them. Let's get into it. Go ahead and open up Mixcraft 9 Pro Studio from the desktop. The only type of track that a MIDI controller will work with is a virtual instrument track. A virtual instrument track should already be inside your new project, but if you need to add more, you can go to Track, Add Track, and select Virtual Instrument Track. You could also use the keyboard shortcut Ctrl-E, which will add a virtual instrument track as well. So we have a few options on how we can start adding notes using our MiniLab. The first option is to click the arm button on our virtual instrument track. When you're ready to record, press R on your keyboard. To stop recording, press the spacebar. Let's do a quick demo. I can see the notes that I just pressed on the MiniLab. They're now in my MIDI region here in my timeline. Now, if I want to add effects to this sound, I could click the FX button on my virtual instrument track and select from any of the available plugins. If I want to change the instrument sound from a piano to, let's say, a trumpet, click the keyboard icon next to the virtual instrument name to open up a list of available MIDI plugins. You can search by clicking on a category on the left, or by typing in the first couple letters of the type of instrument that you want. I'm going to just click on this brass category, click on the virtual instrument sound that you want, and press the space bar to hear how it sounds. When you're done, close out of the MIDI plugin window by clicking this X. There's another way to record with a MIDI controller like the Arturia MiniLab, which is called step recording. Let's delete the MIDI region we created by right-clicking on it and selecting Delete. Double-click inside your timeline on the virtual instrument track line to create a new blank MIDI region. Next, click on the Sound tab. This will show us the MIDI grid that the region consists of, kind of like a detailed view of the region. If you press a few keys on the MiniLab now, you can see where those keys correspond to our piano roll. MIDI step recording lets you take your time when playing so that you're not rushing trying to stay on beat against the metronome. When using step recording, Mixcraft will add a MIDI note every time you press a key on the MiniLab. To enable step recording, press either of these two icons here. Before we start playing notes, let's choose the length that each note should be. Select one of these note styles here. Whole note will be the longest type of note. Half note is half of a whole note. And it gets smaller down the line. I'm going to choose quarter note for now, but I'm also going to show you what a 32th note looks like in step recording, because it gets pretty weird. Before I start pressing keys on my MiniLab, I like to set my marker inside my MIDI grid on a measure line that I can see. The darker vertical line is where I want it to start. Perfect. Now press some notes like this. Notice that no matter how long or short I hold down my note on the MiniLab, it's going to add the note at the same length that we selected earlier. Let's change the note length to 32th to see how it goes. First, I want to expand this MIDI region. I can do that by dragging this line to the right. After clicking 32th, confirm that MIDI step recording is still on. You can tell if it's on if this red light is flashing. If it isn't on, just click on the MIDI step recording button to turn it back on. Now start pressing some notes on the MiniLab. That's kind of funny. Well, you can play around with it. Once your MIDI notes are in there, you can assign any virtual instrument sound that you want. I want to mention some common MIDI note editing tools as well while we're here. Since the MiniLab only has 32 notes, you can transpose those notes in Mixcraft. This means that the notes are raised or lowered. When transposing, the note actually stays the same, but the pitch is changed. Here's an example. I'm going to select these three notes. Hear how they sound now by using your marker and pressing the spacebar to play. After selecting the notes, click the MIDI editing dropdown and select Transpose. You can leave it on octave, but you also have the option to change them by semitone. Let's lower these notes, so instead of 0, click the down arrow once to make this -1. Click OK, and we can see our notes actually disappeared. Well, they're not gone. We can scroll down using this bar to the right of our notes, and we can find them just on a lower scale. When we play them back, we can hear that they're the same note, just in a lower pitch. Other helpful editing functions with MIDI can be found in the MIDI editing dropdown. Quantize will snap the notes on beat. Humanize will force notes to randomly be just a little bit off like a human would be. There's more editing tools, but those are the ones that I regularly use in my workflow. Don't forget, you can use the Select Notes tool to rearrange your existing notes, or the Paint and Add Note tool to add more. Clicking the Step tab will give you a different layout so that you can create using a more simplified grid. Score will show you what your MIDI notes would look like written out onto music sheets. The Arturia MiniLab comes with software. Arturia gives you the light version of Analog 4 and Analog 5, which allow you to use all the knob controls and select from a ton of different high-quality sounds. Let's take a look. Click the keyboard icon on our virtual instrument track. Make sure we're on the All category on the left. Now use the search bar and type the word analog. Open Analog 4 by clicking on it once. Either the VST3 or non-VST3 is fine, doesn't matter. Be patient because this takes a little while to load. Once it's opened, it'll look like this. Click Start. There's a lot of different MIDI sounds to choose from. You can filter by clicking a category on the left. I'm gonna choose synths. To filter even more, you could choose a subcategory, but I'm just gonna leave it on the synth for now. All the MIDI instruments that match this synth filter are gonna show in the center. Click on any one of them to select that instrument. Let's see what the acid binge sounds like. Good lord. Alright, let's try a different one. I'm gonna try junctions. Alright, this is kinda cool. After you select an instrument, you can press and hold down a note on your MiniLab to hear what that instrument sounds like. You can also click on any one of these piano keys in the plugin. While you hold down a note on the MiniLab, you can use the controls to hear how they change the sound. You could also use your mouse to move these virtual knobs within the plugin itself, which will do the same thing as if you were using the MiniLab to do it. Now, if you want to choose a specific type of instrument, remember that we can filter even more on the left. Under the Types dropdown, I'm going to filter by bass now. These bass sounds are a lot cooler than the ones that come stock within Mixcraft. You can also add effects to each instrument at the top. Once you're done selecting an instrument, you can close out of the Analog 4 plugin by using the X in the upper right corner of the plugin. If you want to bring the Analog 4 window back up, just click on the keyboard icon on the virtual instrument track, and then you'll click Show. The instrument will remain the same until you either change it, or if you remove the Analog 4 plugin entirely by clicking the red X. One last piece of kind of unrelated advice is if you want to start off with a drum loop in your project, you can easily do that by clicking on the Library tab. Make sure that this folder icon is selected. Expand these folders and preview drum loops by clicking the green play button next to each loop. If you are deciding to add a drum loop to your project first before building other instruments, I would suggest that you start with a slower loop, something from the 100 BPM range. Once you find the loop that you want to use, identify what the BPM is, it'll say it in the title of the loop, and then change your project BPM here to the same BPM that the loop is that you're going to use. When you're ready, drag and drop the drum loop into a blank audio track in your timeline. If you get a message asking if you want to change the key, you can click No. Line up your first note to start at the very first measure that you want your song to start. I usually give myself at least a measure of wiggle room. Once the drum loop is lined up where you want, you can press this +1 loop button inside the audio region to duplicate it. You can just keep duplicating it the entire length of the song. Alright, so you should have a jumping off point. You should now know how to record using a MIDI interface like the MiniLab. You should know how to do step recording, do some basic MIDI editing, and you should also know how to add a MIDI plugin to your pattern. Go ahead and see what you can come up with. I challenge you to go into the pop-up folder, open the challenges folder, and try to do one of those challenges. We have one where you can try to add bass to a song, one where you can try to add drums to a song. A lot of it is pre-done for you except for the challenge itself. All right, have fun everyone.